All right, Lenka, you are off the hook. It's me and Sheila coordinating. I saw a slight look of panic there on Lenka's face.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, that's it. Couldn't read my notes, sorry.
So we've got an anonymous question that's come through, picking up on something that Michael said just then. Thinking about this from the premise of students leading the space, and what do we know about student learning outcomes in relation, whether all students are able to actively benefit, and how we can set that up. So I'm going to throw that to you first, Michael. Seeing as you raised it, but then if there's anyone else who has some suggestions, please feel free to jump in.
That takes a holistic approach to the way in which we are working across our courses. We call them courses at Griffith. There's other course subjects or units, but it's part of understanding the student learning journey, and being able to use our analytics behind the scenes to actually start to create evidence associated with the learning journey. So the learning journey, of course, starts even before students come to university, and it's a way in which we can, as we become more sophisticated with our data, as we start to link the data across from things like our learning management system through to from FeedbackFruits, from our lecture capture systems and things like that, it makes it, that will ultimately make it easier for us to gain those more in-depth insights into the student learning journey. At this point, we seem to have data structured in different ways across systems, and it's not always that easy to create the logical flow across to create that holistic picture. So I think there's some work in terms of international standards associated with our analytics that needs to be done. I know the Solar group is working on this to some degree, and so it's really nice to think that we can potentially progress this field. Once we progress this field, then of course we start to link that to other outcomes that could be associated, for example, with the progression to work and other elements associated with that students might want to exemplify themselves. But happy for others to comment in this space as well.
Hi, can I just comment from my experience in trimester 3? It's Fiona from Griffith University. One of the things that I did when I designed, I used FeedbackFruits in a very new course, which was all about essential skills. And I wrote in the course learning outcomes that they needed to demonstrate competency in giving and receiving feedback and acting on it. And subsequently, they did all of this work in the course, they demonstrated their competencies and did amazing work, and then left. And then, I would say in the next year, I saw a few of them and they said, oh, I didn't think I was benefiting from doing those workshops, but I now realize I give feedback constantly now, and I do it in a very effective way.
Yeah,
so in the moment, sometimes they don't realize what they're learning, and they may not think that they're actively benefiting from that feedback.
Yep.
But as they mature as students and as members of the Griffith community, they do benefit and use it. And it was great when I saw those students as a group on campus, and they decided to tell me that feedback, because they're like, we know you love feedback, you use FeedbackFruits. So it was quite cute and funny.
That's part of what I was trying to get at earlier with that comment about, it's not just about our individual courses, it's about how we work this process with others in our disciplines.
Well, thank you both, Michael. Thank you, Fiona, for coming to that for us. That's really fantastic. One of the other themes that has come out of this event particularly was around innovation. And so we have a question for Tiffany. Tiffany, if you're still with us and you're able to address one of these questions from the audience, we're very interested to find out about your training project with the Do Tank, if you could.
Okay, so the chaining project has come out of our initial work with FeedbackFruits. So what we initially were doing was just using self and peer review standalone. But what we found is that students are actually requiring tasks that actually support their learning around team tasks. And what we found is that we could give them those tasks, but they weren't actually relating those tasks to the self and peer review. They weren't taking it all the way through. So for chaining, what we were hoping to achieve in this space is to give students a really clear understanding that, you know, if we're asking you to reflect on your confidence around a certain set of criteria around teamwork before you do a team task, then we're going to ask you the same question at the end of that project. So sometimes that they forget that they were supposed to do the first one or the last one. So what we're trying to do is make sure that that scaffolding through the unit is occurring so that they can actually understand that, yes, I do need to do this first task in order for me to complete the reflection at the end of the task. So the chaining is about trying to support the student learning journey within the task, within the unit.
Oh, thank you so much, Tiffany. That's really great. Gives us a little bit of inspiration towards the ever-enhancing field of FeedbackFruits. And I'm certain that most people who partner with FeedbackFruits would agree with that, particularly responsive and particularly innovative. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for taking us through that. Well, I'm going to cross back over to Jo for the next Q&A. You there, Jo?
Yes, thank you, Sheila. Our next question is for Joost. Where does object to feedback go if students want to argue back?
Right, so we've designed it all along to make sure that the student and the teacher can actually indeed start a discussion on the objection. So right now that's not in place yet. So right now it just feeds back into the system so that we can learn from it. But the first step that you saw, which was about teacher insight and oversight, is really about facilitating that discussion, right? So when indeed the teacher can then double check for the student, is this indeed, is this feedback indeed correct or not? And maybe even start a discussion on how to improve. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Just. Appreciate the response there. We have one just come up for Jess. If Jess is still with us, you there, Jess, from Monash University? And this is from Bernie. Why is the discussion point function better than the typical discussion board on our LMS? And, you know, what sense have you got of that? How has that changed or transpired? If you're there, Jess, let us know.
I'm here. I can't start my video, so I'll just respond on audio. I think for me, it works a lot better because the students are already in the platform in FeedbackFruits. They find it easier to post the comments on the discussion points right there and then when they're thinking about the question, whereas if I had the question separately in the forum, that means they have to get out of the document and then go into the discussion forums and then post there. So I think it's probably the convenience of being right there and thinking about it. That's why it's easier for them to engage.
Thank you so much, Jess. Yeah, so it's about that being in context, being the content and the activity in the same place, which, yeah, is very imperative.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I'm going to throw back to Jo.
Thanks, Sheila. A question from Kate Mitchell. Can you reuse the interactive documents across teaching periods? For example, uploading assessment briefs and syllabus in there and using it as a Q&A or a frequently asked question space. How do you manage the privacy with rolling over previous questions for new students to see, or would you just start from scratch?
Yeah, great question. I'll take this. So you can reuse the assignments that you set up previously over different courses. They sort of stick to your name, so you can use them in different courses again. The good thing there in terms of the privacy is that you only copy the setup that you have made as a teacher. So student contributions will not be copied over in that sense. So you just have the canvas that you put up basically initially without any of the contributions there that you can reuse over time. And the same goes for if you are using, for instance, peer review, group memory evaluation, you can also only reuse the criteria that you have set up. So if you have an elaborate rubric, as some have mentioned in their presentations, then you can just reuse that one and can build a different type of assignment around it if needs to be.
Fantastic. Thank you, Annika. Sounds efficient. And we certainly love that. Thank you so, so much. Now, this one is an interesting one. It's not directed to any one panel member at all, but I think we'll be pretty interested to find out, or perhaps it's something that we'll all learn as we go along. This is actually about student fatigue in doing self and peer and group assessment and feedback. And like many other universities, certainly at Griffith University, we like to have a programmatic approach. We like that idea that there is some consistency and thread, obviously, through the activities that students do as they progress through those particular programs. So we've got a couple of people from the audience that have actually addressed that question. Can we ask if any course that has FeedbackFruit embedded across several units, so for us it's program and courses, other people it's courses and units, if the students, or if there have been any studies done or any studies being enacted perhaps in other areas of research around that student fatigue and the use of self and peer? It's a tough one.
I wouldn't mind speaking to that just briefly.
Yeah.
What we have tried to do is ensure that we're not using self and peer review and that sort of tool set more than once in a trimester. So when we look at from a course perspective, we want to ensure that we're giving students the opportunity to develop these skills, but we certainly don't want them to see repetitive stuff. So for each year level, we have slightly different tasks involved. They see slightly increasing rubrics that change over time, but they become more specific to what we want their final course learning outcomes to reflect. So we do try really hard not to fatigue the students because we know that that can happen. We did have an instance in a couple of units where the unit chair wanted to do formative review after formative review after formative review, and the students actually were quite upset by that because it is a lot of time and effort to do that. So our recommendation again was, if you're going to use formative review, do it once within the project and then have the summative at the very end.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany. That's a great strategy, and it's one that we should all think about. I can certainly tell you that, you know, we're evaluating at the moment, and we're hearing a little bit of fatigue about the reflection types as well, because it's being added into every single experience. So really something for us as designers, curriculum, you know, consultants and educators to get a grasp on, I think, as we progress. Thank you for sharing your strategies and tactics.
I think it's important that when we do that, and we're asking students to do stuff that they potentially perceive as being extra to what their assessment items actually are. And so if we are asking them to do that, that should be reflected in the rubrics we're using and things like that. So there should be a reward in a sense for being able to contribute. So it's not just expected, but that it is actually built into the assessment itself, so they don't feel as though they're being, you know, used, as it were, that they're actually getting benefit from it themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Michael has just said. So for me, my students do the group evaluation tool every week for 7 out of the 12 weeks of the semester. And they don't feel fatigued at all because it actually counts for marks. So the students know that part of what they do for that week is that group evaluation. And they appreciate it because they can actually fine tune their behavior based on the feedback that they're getting from the group evaluations.
Yep.
That's great. Great structure. Thank you all so much. I'm going to pass across to Jo, see what we've got next.
Okay, well, again, a bit of a general question. I imagine there's a few people who might be able to offer some insights on this one. How easy is all of this to use from a teaching perspective? How do non-savvy teachers cope with incorporating it into their teaching?
I was about to say, oh, who's that?
You go, Fiona.
Okay, I was about to say, I'm a pretty savvy person, but I do tend to break tools when I try and test them out, because I'm the sort of evil person that goes, I'm going to do this wrong to see how badly it can go, so that I can, when it goes wrong for other academics, I can figure out how to do it. It's actually very user-friendly. It's probably one of the most user-friendly tools that I've ever used, and I've worked at 4 or 5 universities and used a whole heap of different tools. One of the feedback I got from a student who was, I think he's in his 70s, and he said that he found the interface one of the easiest things to work through. Wow. And he's a mature age student, and he's also deaf, and so he was saying it was one of the best things because his screen reader worked really well with it, didn't skip sections, and yeah, very, very easy to use. So across the board, I think it's really good, and we can always have sandpits from your learning designers where you can play with it beforehand, so you're not working with it live. So I'll hand over to Tiffany.
Thanks, Fiona. I think one of the challenges that we've had, because we're learning support team, so we're working with lots of academics, and what we find is it's best to have a one-on-one conversation with an academic. And there's 2 facets to that conversation. One is to ascertain how well they can use the technology, how comfortable they are in that space, as well as how they're going to use it from a pedagogical point of view as well. So we tend to have a broader overview talk to make sure that it's what they're wanting to do. And then we actually do have what we call a care package. So we try to provide academics with a how-to guide about what we're trying to do. But we have really savvy academics who just want to keep going, and they ask for more and more and more as well. So it's basically trying to pinpoint the point of need, I guess, of each academic that we support.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Thank you all, and thank you to all of our panelists today and our participants, and especially thanks to the audience. I'm actually going to introduce back into the fold at the moment Max. Max would like to give us a bit of a send-off today, and on behalf of all of us as well, I'd like to thank Max on all of our behalves for bringing us together and letting us all be part of this FeedbackFruits event. Thank you, Max.
Hi all. It doesn't happen often that I really become speechless, but I think all the heartwarming words, but also the inspiration that was re-energized with me over the past hours about how you have all integrated FeedbackFruits, but also the results that you have been getting with your students, and also how you are now already envisioning and inspiring each other into how the future might look in terms of educational technology and using FeedbackFruits. Yes, and I think I can speak for everyone at FeedbackFruits here. It's really heartwarming, and
Definitely.
yeah, I really want to thank you all for coming together, and then a specific big thanks for Griffith and Deacon, basically really being on the forefront of the Dutang community that we really envision in Australia to emerge as it's doing in Europe. So yeah, thank you all for taking the time to putting this together, collaborating with us and each other, and inspiring, I think, a lot of people globally. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We look forward to being in Australia again when we can, to also thank you in person for everything. It was a very, very nice day for us as well. Definitely worth the getting up early.
For sure. And for all the people in the audience, thank you so much for attending. And if anyone needs any kind of extra information, you always know how to find us. And we're more than happy to help you set up with any kind of testing or piloting. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Matt and Annika. Everybody, we have come to the end of the event today. I just want to remind everyone that we'll have post-event resources, so keep an eye out on the FeedbackFruits website and communications that will be coming from Deakin University as well, just to let you know where things are. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic weekend and get some sleep, FeedbackFruits.
Not for long.
Thank you all.
so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.